actually. I do want to be a wife and a mother.
In the middle of making my decision about whether to dispense the pill or whether or not, and I actually went to about 7 priests, he said to me, Patrick, you cannot do it. You cannot cross that line.
Patrick and Thérèse McCrystal, you're very welcome to our podcast, to Breaking Bread. It's a real pleasure having you. We've been trying to get you here for some time, and it is so good to have our old friends back in our home again.
Sure. Hopefully the cameras won't break, Tony.
When did we first meet? We were talking about that
trying to think about that. Do you remember?
You were at a wedding in Ballybofey with your friends who we didn't know at the time.
Ronan and Lorraine, I think. Quinn from Belfast, I think.
We still don't know them.
No, I don't know, was John Bosco born or not? So it's at least 15 years, maybe 16 years. But I was trying to remember, was Families of Nazareth before that? Or
well,
after?
I'll tell you now, Maria was a baby when we started Families of Nazareth, and she's 19.
But you had it was established when
I know,
we came.
but I do
remember Liam as a baby. I do remember Liam as
he's 16.
Yeah, so he and John were babies at your coffee table at the same time. I remember that vividly. So it's 16 years at least.
Yeah.
Incredible, really.
There's been a lot of water under the bridge in those 16 years.
There has, and a lot of babies. And I must say, we did Women of Grace.
Right.
You did Women of Grace and brought me into it. And then you asked me to do it. And I was like, I don't know if I could do it. And Patrick says, why would you not do it? I'm like, what if I don't know the answers? It's not better to do it and not know the answers than to not do it at all. And I'm like, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome. No, a very good Turin accent there.
Thank you.
So I think when we came here, though, we were living in Antrim, and then we moved to Donegal town, and that's where I did Women of Grace, wasn't it?
Yes.
In a wee house in Donegal.
Yes.
Was it Brian McCaughey's house you were living in?
Yeah. Shout out to the Mackay's.
Yeah. And I remember that house now that you mentioned it, and that you were living in Antrim. People used to come and park their car.
That's right. You went on one of your French holidays, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Wow.
Yeah, we got free parking. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. We were probably supposed to donate, but we didn't know that we were supposed to donate.
I think you actually left the car keys and said use the car.
Did we?
People never knew we went to Cork a lot.
I don't know if we did use the car. But
the first time you guys came to our house, I remember being so intimidated by Patrick McCrystal. It was because I'd heard so much about you. Father Rory Brady gave a sermon actually at Mass about this pharmacist who had given up everything because he didn't want to prescribe the abortifacin pill. And so I knew you from that sermon. And there, the man, the legend, was coming to the house. And you were staying in the house because you were going to this wedding. And yeah. Then we got to know
You were just normal.
You're just normal, Patrick.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Normal as we go.
What is the story? You studied to be a pharmacist, and then you decided that you didn't want to be a pharmacist because you would have to prescribe this pill, or full of prescription that was prescribed for this pill.
I was dispensing for 6 years, and I did dispense the contraceptive pill, several times a week. Never dispensed the morning after pill. And then I took a job in a small pharmacy outside Belfast where I was required to dispense the so-called morning after pills because it was the only pharmacy in the village. And the reason why I gave up the dispensing of the pill really was, it was an act of self-preservation, because I knew the day I die, I'm 61 now, I was 27 then. I knew that the day I die and the moment I die, the church teaches that we all come into our personal judgment. And I knew when that moment arrives, I did not want to have X number of wee babies lost by abortifacients by my hand as a pharmacist on the day of my personal judgment. Mm-hmm. So when I handed in my notice to my job, it was really an act of self-preservation. People say to me, oh, you had great faith. Oh, but it wasn't really. It was an act of self-preservation. So that started me off on the roller coaster of 3 years unemployed, and I went for 30 interviews. And when my potential employers heard why I was looking for a job, no one wanted to employ me. And then Our Lady brought me deeper into my Catholic faith, and I was doing a rosary a day, and then she tapped me on the shoulder one day, Patrick, would you consider 2 rosaries a day? I said, okay, I'll start to do 2 rosaries a day. And then after a few more months, another wee tap on the shoulder, Patrick, would you consider 3 rosaries a day? And I said, well, okay, then I'll do 3 rosaries a day. And a few more months later, I found another tap on the shoulder. Patrick, would you consider 4 rosaries a day? And I said, hold on, woman, I'm a very busy man. And it hadn't occurred to me I was unemployed or anything. So I decided to do, okay, I'll do the 4 rosaries a day. Then a few months later, then the doors miraculously opened for the job that I'm still doing 28 years later. Executive Director of Human Life International Ireland, based in Knock, and working for an Ireland where God is first, life is sacred, and the family is cherished.
Wow.
Long story cut short.
That's very good.
And had you guys met at 27 or like at that stage?
No, I was an unemployed pharmacist, and our friend Jason, who was a convert to Catholicism from Protestantism, he wanted this pharmacist guy to come and give us testimony at a Youth 2000 retreat in 1996, 97.
January 97.
Aye. So I was invited to come and give me testimony as the unemployed pharmacist. I'd spoken to this girl on the phone. She had a nice voice. I walked in. I remember the spot. I could tell you, I could bring you to the spot where I first met her. Nice looking girl. Okay. And but I was dating somebody else at the time, actually. That was another whole story. And so I gave me testimony. And then what actually happened was 3 years later, the relationship at that time that I was in broke up. And I didn't want to look at another girl for another 3 years. I just had this 3 years in my head, but I didn't. And then I was invited to go to the United Nations to lobby UN delegates at what's called a Beijing +5 Women's Feminist Conference. And I just felt in my heart I needed to bring a team of 5 other people. The first person that I thought to bring was herself, because she's got a personality that she was able to apply herself to any person group, like even, and there was a whole lot of LGBT type situation there. And even though she may not share those views, she's a very good, personable person who could relate to anybody. So I thought she'd be good to bring on the team. And then I asked 4 others. And then that's where we started working together and seeing what each other was like. And at the end of that, I said to her, we might pray for a week or two, and then we'll just see what God might be saying to us about connecting. And then the story goes on. If you want me to keep going, I don't mind.
We had actually met before that, though.
Yeah.
Because we had, at Youth 2000 in those early days, we had started serving HLI events and conferences. So we would be your, what is it called, orienteers, or introducing your speakers and doing registration and all that.
Compares or whatever, yeah.
So that's where the connection came, that you asked me then to go to the UN. It's very exciting.
And but I want to go back before, and I'm really interested in you, and your story is really, really important. But I want to go back to the pharmacy thing. That's so good, because I have this idea that Patrick just paved the way. You couldn't get a job.
Yeah, 30 interviews. Nobody wanted to employ me.
Did you apply for any hospitals?
I did, and they didn't work out either. And then I was looking at buying a pharmacy, and there were a few possible offers. And it just never worked out.
Wow.
Yeah.
You had a good priest though at the time, didn't you?
Yeah, I had an Opus Dei priest who said I was in the middle of making my decision about whether to dispense the pill or whether or not. And I actually went to about 7 priests, most of them in the greater Belfast area. And I asked what, and virtually all of them said, follow your conscience. All right. Okay. But it was Father, what do you call him? Charlie Connolly. I think he's dead now. He said to me, Patrick, you cannot do it. You cannot cross that line. And I needed to hear those words from somebody.
I knew it. Yeah.
And I knew that was the truth. But it took somebody just with the conviction to lay it down. And a soul needs to hear that. I needed to hear it. And my soul. And so my soul wasn't satisfied by the other counsel I got. Follow your conscience. I needed black and white. Guys work that way, black and white. And that's what I needed to hear.
We had similar experience in our marriage where you needed to hear black and white, and it took someone to say no.
And it was a consultant doctor in Letterkenny Hospital who had a reputation for personal holiness, who we went to see, and it was about the contraceptive pill and using prophylactics or whatever, because we had long absences in our marriage, in our early days especially. And he says, sorry, I can't help you. I often wonder about couples who have long absences, and it's awful. It's really painful, but I can't help you.
We're going deep very early here, aren't we?
Yeah, but I can't help you. You're just going to have to struggle through it. And so it was putting it back on us that we had to actually, fair play to him is right. Yeah. But his reputation preceded him. And so a GP had told us that he had turned and changed his mind, and that no longer did you have to, follow what the church taught. So that's how we got to see him, or that's how we saw him. And he said, look, I'm really sorry. He hadn't turned at all. It was the GP's conscience that had turned.
But I think it brings up an interesting point for couples, you know, and this is not to be derogatory towards our priests or anything. If your conscience is still prickling you, it's incumbent upon each of us to figure that out ourselves and keep searching and keep asking, you know.
And I think we have to sharpen our consciences too, though. Like, and I mean, I fear for this generation and the dumbing down with all the devices and the phones that I think our consciences are just becoming muted.
There's a couple of things I would say in relation to that. One, there's so much access to good material out there as well as and that's not to advocate for the use of smartphones everywhere. I would say in the main they're net negative. Second thing is diocesan priests are dealing with everybody from way down here, and they get the odd one who's where Patrick was way up there. Opus Dei are, and this is not a negative against Opus Dei, but Opus Dei are dealing with way up there in the main, from the middle to up there. The diocesan priesthood are dealing generally from here to there, you know? And so that's when they give advice, that's the advice. They're general practitioners, they're not specialists. And they are people, they are people who are doing their best. Opus Dei are specialists, you know, Dominicans are specialists. So are the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. You know, you name the orders, they attract the people who are super into their faith and are, you know.
And I think your charism or your leaning will go to a particular priest or a particular order, you know, in your search.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And so what they might have been saying was follow your conscience. And that's a good general advice. What you needed was a specialist to tell you actually, and you got that advice from your specialist.
Yeah.
So how did you then start dating?
Well, I have a few things to say. Do you want to say something? I'm doing a lot of talking.
You're good. Actually, no. Well, I mean, that we did a retreat. It was supposed to be a retreat for leaders. I wanted to galvanize a few people. We thought we'd get 12 to 20 people. We had 150 people came to this impromptu retreat in Maynooth on the feast of St. John Bosco, who's Youth 2000's patron. And Our Lady, it was a consecration to Our Lady weekend too. And it just kind of, this whole event just grew out of our control. It was completely a God moment of, flip me, what's happening? Father Michael Ross was our priest, and he was the biggest hearted open house man you could meet. And he's like, let them come. He's like, we don't have any bedrooms. Doesn't matter, just let them come. So, you know, it was getting 60, 70, 80, 90. And we only had 2 weeks to plan it. And it was like, okay, Jesus, how are we going to pull this one off? And so Jason asked Patrick to come. I met a Mexican girl in a pizzeria in Dublin, and she loved Our Lady Guadalupe. And I was like, would you like to give a talk at the weekend? Remember Luth Maria? She gave one of the best talks I've ever heard.
Wow.
And it's like, if you just meet people, if you just open and you just knock on the door. So, but the whole thing was kind of miraculous, the whole event. I had no eyes for him at all on that weekend. I was up to Hido running this event and just trying to deal with the miracle that was unfolding. And then a couple of priests came who we never saw again. We don't know who they were. They came, they were dynamite, and they just disappeared. And we're like, wow, who were they? So that was where we were at. I was working in Bewley's, the coffee shop in Dublin, and then doing Youth 2000 kind of as a side hustle.
So then one of the things that happened to me was about that time, I was driving in Belfast up around Saintfield Road, round a big corner, and God spoke to me out of the blue. And this wasn't something that happened to me very often, but I felt I had this like inner sense. It wasn't an audible voice, but just this communication was just communicated to me. Patrick, I don't want you to kiss another girl on the lips to the day you get married. And I was driving the car and I said, what? You can't be serious.
So you had been kissing girls on the lips up to this point?
Up to this point, I'd been dating girls.
One or two.
No, your answer the question.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So I said, what? You can't be serious. I'd never heard of this idea. But that's what I believe I heard. So 3 years later, when we went out on our first date, well, I suppose I had to break the news. So, so we were walking up this place in Oath, a park, very nice park, arm in arm. And I said to her, Therese, I was driving up around Saintfield around the corner, and I was driving around this corner, and I felt God speak to me. And, yeah, okay. And I felt he said to me, I don't want you to kiss another girl on the lips to the day you get married. So she said, great. I was thinking the same thing myself.
I had been. Yep.
So what we decided to do was we would, so skies, we need black and white, cut off points, parameters. So I decided that I wouldn't kiss Thérèse below the eyebrows during our courtship. So that's what we did. And so we had an absolute ball with great fun.
Yeah.
And I just kissed her only above the eyebrows. And what that did was it freed us up from all that mental and emotional and even physical entanglement that can happen so easily, and left us free to discern quite quickly, gee, there's somebody that God might actually want me to consider marrying.
What age were you then?
27? No, I wasn't. I was 35.
Yeah, you were 35.
I was 35.
I was 25, 26. Do you remember the team that came over from Canada? Was it the Challenge team, or they came over and they did school presentations, purity and stuff like that? So we had done a few things with them. It became Youth for Truth then, like the Irish version. And then Barbara McGuigan had come to an HLI conference who did the best talks on purity and modesty, all from a Catholic perspective, but just from a really loving standpoint, from the best for the person. And there was no judgment or anything. It's just, she called you higher. She just had this ability, like that specialist. She had that ability to just call you higher. So I had listened to her and I was like, this is the way to go. And she talked about being free and being holy and having your fun and not sinning. And it was just, this is just a much better way of going. And I had gone out with a few people, and the physical entanglement does make it hard to discern. Is this person for me or not? Because you fear being without them. Whereas if you don't have that emotional entanglement, you don't have that. You haven't overstepped the mark to then fear it being gone. You're.
And so when you say physical entanglement, do you mean full-blown sex?
No. No, I had, thank God, I had preserved myself for Patrick, but kissing, hugging, whatever. Yeah. Just being very close.
There's a word for that, and I don't want to, I can't think of it, but there's a word for just being a bit raunchy without even doing anything.
Well, I don't even know if it was that much. It was just, I think we discerned very quickly because we had little physical entanglement. I don't know how to describe it in the reverse. I think our discernment was quite quick, and we were older. I was 25. He was 35.
We decided we were going to write a book. The problem is there is no problem.
That's right. Because we wanted to be together and we wanted to be physical. And it's like, no, we need to make a decision. But because we hadn't messed up our thinking, it was like, actually, I can discern this. I would like to spend the rest of my life with this person.
Wow. You were your own self chaperones, in terms of you didn't need somebody to be with you.
But that's only because God spoke to me. So he takes all the credit. If he hadn't said those words, so we might have just went down the road that virtually everybody else.
You were also there.
But he had spoken, and he had spoken to me separately, but at the same time.
Yeah.
And did he, so just describe what it was like for you when he spoke to you? The amount of people who come into this podcast room and say, God spoke to me, anybody would think we're absolutely cracked.
Yeah.
But it appears,
God
despite all the evidence to the contrary in the culture, that God actually speaks.
He is, that's right. I suppose when I hear, it's not hearing this Morgan Freeman voice booming. It's the thoughts, the senses. It's what you're reading. If you pray, it's getting an answer maybe a day later, a week later. I used to always moan that you could go into a holy hour, do a holy hour and hear nothing and just be distracted for the hour. But then half an hour later, a day later, you might just get an answer to something. And Father Thomas said, that's the fruit of your holy hour. That's you're putting in the mileage there, and it's opening the gates to those graces, and they'll slowly shower down as you walk through the day, So I think, for me, it was when I heard Barbara McGuigan speak, it was just that resonating truth. It's like, there is a woman who loves the church. She loves the gospel. She loves young people. It was like, I can trust her. And it was like, I want to be as good a Catholic as she is. And she must have been, what at the time, 70? 570? Like, to me, she was a lot
an Irish person?
American.
Okay.
She's still, to this day, for me, the best speaker I've ever heard. Having heard lots of people over the years.
Is she alive?
She is. Yeah, she is. She's
one of her
good.
best talks was Mary, God's model and our masterpiece. It was a pro-life talk, but it was the most fantastic talk on the rosary. It was very inspirational.
Yeah, she just loves. She pours. She can speak to a group of complete, full-on, pure pro-abortionists. And by the end of the talk, she can have them just loving and weeping with sorrow and desiring the truth, because she speaks from a point of love. And that she wants more for you and you deserve more. And we should be giving you more.
And Christopher West writes about that in his book. Oh, what's the name? It's a purple book. The Truth About Sex,
Okay.
or The Good News About Sex
Right.
and Marriage. But he talks about exactly what you're talking about. If you love the person and you want what's best for
That's
the
right.
person, then entering into a lustful relationship is self-gratifying as
Yeah.
opposed to wanting what's best for the other.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we discovered was that when we actually everything moved quite quickly for us. We started dating about April. We got engaged in October. We were married in January.
We wanted to get married in the Jubilee year.
Before the Jubilee year ended.
Ended.
And that was we were getting married just 3 days before it ended. So that's why everything moved so quickly. But because I only kissed Thérèse above the eyebrows, that was really special to her. And right 6 years later, it's still special.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it is, it's early courtship. So if Patrick kisses me on the forehead, it's still lovely. You know, it's a very sweet a touch, you know, it's a very
I
gentle
love
touch.
this story. I think this is beautiful. Go on.
Yeah. I mean, so we were asked to give our testimony. So we were getting married in January. So there was Youth 2000 retreat it was at Esker at the time. And there had been an incident, shall we say, involving two people of the opposite sex. So they were separated before the incident escalated. But because of that, then we were asked to give our testimony because shockwaves had gone round, blah, blah, blah. So we gave our testimony and there was a lot of laughing and Kehoan. And a lot of these people were coming to our wedding. A couple of priests on the retreat didn't appreciate our testimony, weren't in favor of it at all.
They thought that we were saying the church said you're not allowed to kiss below the eyebrows during courtship. That's what one
And they got
priest
quite
thought we
angry.
were saying. We weren't saying that, but that's what he heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we kind of were saying it, but anyway, in our own way.
No, but but the church didn't teach that.
we weren't declaring church. So we had a great time laughing and going. A number of people came up and asked us questions, and a lot of people shared with me that they had been so hurt coming out of relationships where they had been very entangled physically, and they just were lost, and they didn't want to enter into another relationship. They still felt called to marriage, but they were so afraid. So it began to let me see there is such a massive world here that we just don't talk about. That these hurts from just dating relationships. So I suppose it's been on our heart ever since to help young people in those areas to avoid those pitfalls, to avoid those hurts, because you need to be as strong as you can together when you enter into your marriage. And if we can avoid those pains and things, it just makes it a lot easier in some ways, you know.
So there was a young couple just came into our home quite recently who had just started dating. So I had a wee word with the fella and I said, just a wee tip, you know, what do you want to hear? Just from my own experience, you don't have to if you don't want to. He said, yeah, go ahead. So I said, the more you say, the less you do now, the more glorious it is when the proper time comes. And he said, yeah, I want to do that. So they said, we've already talked about that. So when young people hear that message and it's presented to them in a right way, they actually rise to it beautifully. That message of holding back and waiting and keeping the gift wrapped to the proper time.
So then we went from that retreat to 2 weeks later, maybe 3 weeks later, we had our wedding. A lot of these people were there. So when it came to Father Peter saying, you may now kiss the bride. So he kissed me and the whole crowd just went wild in the church. And my family were all going, what is going on here? So they had,
most people didn't realize what was going on until I explained it at the speech later on that day.
Your first kiss.
And it was lovely. And it was really beautiful because a number of people have commented on that since, you know. So it did touch people, and we didn't do it to touch other people. It was what we felt the Lord lead us to.
And it's funny what you had said earlier on about men want to know, like, where's the line? And that would be a common question that I would get asked, you know, how far is too far? And again, Christopher West, that book, he really answers that very well. It's like, in
a nutshell, what's his answer?
He said the church does not specifically say how far is too far, because it's not necessarily about the physicality. It's about your heart and what's your disposition and why are you doing what you're doing.
And if you're asking that question, you're asking the wrong question.
Exactly.
Because Father Paul Marks, who's the founder of Human Life International, 40 years ago said, it's not a question of how far is too far. He said is you don't start.
He also said, and some people don't like this, but I love this phrase. He said, if you're not ready for children, you're not ready to get married. And if you're not ready for marriage, you're not ready to date. So his point was that we should be praying and discerning our vocation. Guys, go off, visit the priests, visit the seminary, have those conversations so that if you are called to marriage, and he said, most people are called to marriage. Like, don't be afraid of knocking on those doors. You can close that door and go, nope, I am free to enter into marriage. And that's one of your consents of your marriage. It's one of your premises of marriage is to be free. And if you've discerned not the priesthood or not religious life, you're like, okay, I can knuckle down now and get on with this. So I liked his teaching on that. And so that was his response when I asked him that question for the chastity presentations. He said, we just shouldn't even be asking that question. It's like, what is marriage for? What is courtship for? And he said, yes, we date to see is this person who I will marry, but you have to have discerned before that point. Yeah, I'm called to marriage, because we all know probably many people who have gone out with people and halfway through the guy goes, actually, I think I might be called to the priesthood. Can we just wait there for a minute?
And that's deeply wounding as well. And I don't know if it happens as often. I don't know how many girls say, can we just hold off? I want to go to religious life. Maybe it does. But I think that has to be done before. In fairness, to offer dignity to the person we're dating, to offer that full freedom that I'm open to being fully yours if this is the Lord's call.
In essence, what she's saying is that what you could say to young people is you can try out the priesthood, you can try out being a sister, but you can't try out marriage.
That's right.
And one of the things, the way it says in the Song of Songs, don't awaken love until it pleases. And so there's a proper time for awakening love. And that proper time is not during courtship. It's keeping that whole package till marriage, and then the whole package and all its glory and beauty can be unwrapped and unspoiled. And that's the vision I think that God would have for all of us and all people's lives. And sometimes then when I'm privileged sometimes to do, talks at different youth events, and I do different talks on this whole area of marriage and preparing for marriage and am I ready for marriage? One of the things I say is, I've lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was going to say.
I was going to say
keeping it. The more that you keep before, the more beautiful it is afterwards.
Yeah.
But going back to your original comment that we were getting very intimate very soon, if a couple is to may experience difficulties early in marriage or in times of abstention or whatever, if you can do that before you're married, it's like your school of self-mastery. It's like, we've been here, we can do this. Our arms are ready for this battle. Whereas I think if we've given in to those things, it's very hard to retrain and it can be done and it can be reclaimed.
Was never an option. We've got to do this, but do we do this right or do we do it compromised? That was the question.
But for any couple though, I'm saying that, the more we can train ourselves pre-marriage, train ourselves for the battle of purity, the battle of freedom, and it is a battle.
See, one of the things I do share to young people when I'm speaking is that if you happen to be in that unfortunate position where you have given yourself away before your proper time, one of the glorious things about being a Roman Catholic is you can go to confession, and provided that you're confessing from a full heart and deeply repentant, and I'll never do this again, Lord, give me the grace. When you walk out of the confession, you're white as snow again. It's like nothing ever happened. You're like clean. And from that point onwards, then moving towards the time of your marriage. Because what happened to me was, when I was 15, my mother said to me one day, and I can't quite remember the form of words she used, but she said to me words along the lines of, God is greatly offended if you give yourself away before your proper time, meaning to a woman. And I knew as a 15-year-old, I did not want to offend God. So as I headed out into the world and I started my disco career and into university and all of that, and all the different people that I met, those words were always in the back of my head. God is greatly offended if you give yourself away before your proper time. And those words kept me out of a lot of trouble. So much so that when the day arrived for my marriage, thank God I had kept myself for my wife. And it just shows you the power of a mother's words, a parent's words to their children.
And your dad's words.
And what were they?
You only get one bite of the cherry.
He always said, you only get one bite of the cherry. And that's it. There's only one bite, and you don't get a second bite. So whatever your bite is, that is your bite. There isn't another bite.
That's
And
a way.
That was his simple way of saying it. There's only one chance.
There's only one way.
So, with regards to advising your own children in terms of dating, do you have certain rules or?
Yeah. Well, you see, what we're encouraging our children to do is ultimately the goal is heaven. So who am I? So if I feel called to marriage, then if I'm looking at someone who may be a potential spouse, ask yourself the question, is this someone who could help get my soul to heaven?
Sure.
And secondly, is this someone who, if I happen to have children with this person, is this someone who I think would help bring our children's soul to heaven?
Mm-hmm.
So, because that's the end goal of it all anyway. These short, 80 years, if you even live that long, and then it's gone in a snap. And then you have a long time to look back at what you did for those wee short few years.
Or
So that's one wee thing.
Yeah.
And then the other wee thing is that, you see, there's a couple of things, right, going straight to the point because our time is short. The green flags that I would be encouraging my children to look for a potential spouse
After
is
they've discerned what their
after
vocation
they've
is.
discerned that
We
they're
talk a
being
lot about
called
vocations and things, yeah.
to marriage. Yeah, if that's what they feel God's calling
From
them.
their early ages.
And this is not just off the top of my head from memory. Is this person open to life? In other words, have they orientated themselves? Do they understand the church's teaching? The church says no to contraception. And if somebody is saying they're open to life according to Humani Vitae, provided they know what Humani Vitae is, then it's a really big green flag, because the studies show that couples who enter into marriage and stay open to life, and there's a whole conversation there, their statistical marriage
Success.
stay together rate is really high compared to those who use artificial contraception. Yeah. So somebody who's sharing that vision to be open to life and no contraception. So that's one big green flag. The second big green flag would be willingness to say the rosary once a day with your spouse from day one to the day you die. Another one would be...
well, for the girls, the guys have to... We would encourage... So if a guy shows interest in the girl, we would be asking him to have a conversation with Patrick, which I think Martin Moran may have shared. I don't know if he's shared all the details.
Yeah, Martin Moran was
a big inspiration for us.
Big inspiration and the big sort of trailblazer on the young man coming and having a chat with dad before he asks one of my daughters out.
Mm-hmm. And that certainly marks us. We're marked by the young people. It shows you a lot
of the caliber of the young man or the lack of.
Yeah. When you meet a young man who's prepared to have a conversation with you in a culture where people just go out with each other and the parents may never even meet them. They could go out for 6 months sometimes, and we're learning that parents are never meeting them, and you're like, there's something really wrong there. So I think, like in our household, there's a lot of chit chat. I mean, and the other thing about we have 9 children, there's a lot of humiliating chit chat too. Like, children are very good at keeping each other level.
Yeah.
So if there is anyone on the horizon, they're just going to be annihilated at the first dinner. So if they can survive the first dinner,
dinner over at the house.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking you guys have done a really good job on your kids, because I know your kids. However, we're not hearing about the potential rebellion that may have happened in the process. Has that happened? You don't name names, but did it go down well? Or was this just this is how you're going to do it?
And it wasn't just one issue on its own. Like, there'd be a lot of conversation, and I think that would be, for me, that would be a significant difference to my upbringing, where we just talked about very little. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my parents very dearly. They've both gone to their award, and they were great people of faith. So I had that, but you just didn't talk about. I think
it was a generational thing.
You didn't talk about relationship things. You didn't. It was just, and it wasn't even that you decided not to, it just didn't happen.
And that's generally the culture, the secular culture now, whereas the Catholic culture, the purpose of this podcast is to encourage those conversations in the Catholic culture.
But also having to say that there's no guarantees about anything or anybody.
How do you mean?
In the sense rebellion. That about rebellion, or any one or more of your children making choices that you wouldn't make. In the sense that we're all afflicted by the world, the flesh and the devil. And there's just so far that parents can go informing, creating, and then there comes a point where each child has to be making their own choices. At least you've instilled what they know where you're at, as they can look back in the years to come and see, engage, where am I now compared to where I might have been or should have been or could have been.
I think as well as we get older, like, the first 4 were the experiment, and then the last 5 have been raised by the first 4. We look in. So you think, would we have done it differently? You know, we were who we were,
of course,
with the grace available,
and you got to be easy on yourself. Where you were.
And you just kind of like, jeepers, I don't think I'd have done that again. You know, but.
And, you know, the frame that we listened to Patrick and Thérèse talk about how they parented their kids is the frame of the culture, which is influenced by Hollywood. And, you know, like, what about breakfast in bed? Is he going to make you breakfast in bed? What about romance? You know, all these things that, were your kids influenced by that? Did they watch movies? You know,
we didn't have a TV. We never had a TV. That was in the early policy, but we have watched movies. Like, we've done DVDs galore.
But they're selected by mum and dad. On
the whole, you'll always get some things that scrape through, you know. One thing that has surprised me, and I don't know if it's happened in your family, that my kids will watch a movie many, many times. Whereas my culture was, seen that movie, I want to see it again. You know, it would have to be a very, very special movie to watch it a second time. So that, I think, has been a fruit of not having the TV, that it's like, well, this is what we've got. So that one was good, that one wasn't so good, you know, so they'll watch things again, and we'll talk about the movie, and, you know, and still today, someone will say a line from a movie they watched 15 years ago, and 7 people will respond, you know. So I don't think we haven't had rebellion. They've certainly, as they get older, they do things, and we kind of go, don't know that I'd do it that way. But then Father Philip Scott says that's where you just have to entrust them to the love and mercy of God.
Totally.
You've done,
and you've formed them as best you can.
And they're created for independence.
That's right.
And to move away.
That's it.
Home education was a huge, we found a huge benefit, in the sense that when Thérèse and I started dating, I had seen a couple of families who had home educated the children, and as a single man, I liked what I saw, and I liked the kids, and I liked the kids' ability to relate to age groups, adults and all age groups. So when I was starting to connect with Thérèse, I sort of ran the idea of, Pastor, you know, have you ever married, would you ever think of home education? So she said she would. So that when we got married, we sort of knew from the outset that that's a road that we wanted to go. In a way, it's a calling. I remember asking one of the parents in Dublin many years ago, you know, why are you home educating your children? She said, because I want my children to get to heaven. And I thought to myself, and I was single at the time, that's a very good answer. Now, I'm not saying kids who go to school are not going to heaven. I'm not saying that. But her motivation for wanting to home educate was to help at least increase the chances of her children getting to heaven. And so I actually think there was a lot of sense in that now, looking back, in the sense that the church teaches that parents are called to procreate and educate the children. It's not just procreate. And a lot of parents understand, it's just the way the culture goes, delegate that responsibility to the school system. And there's been many fantastic teachers and many fantastic schools over the years, all of that. And a lot of fine young people have come out of the school system. However, the way the world is going right now, and what's happening, the hijacking of the school system, that those values that you would have hoped were being inculcated in a Catholic school setting is no longer guaranteed. And the home education option becomes for the salvation of your children's soul, or at least being formed in the right values. At least that's where it starts coming into its own in Ireland today.
I just think we need to be careful that, you know, that I get what you're saying, but I think the fact that we're called to procreate and educate, that doesn't necessarily mean
not just home educated.
Exactly.
All parents are called to educate. Yeah.
All parents are called, and we should never abdicate that responsibility to anybody else except for.
So we're called to educate, not abdicate. And that might involve home education or school education.
And, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, I don't know about you guys, but as we're getting older, that's harder.
Yeah.
You know, the energy level's not there like
the
it used to
changed.
Be. Well,
our relevance has changed as well in relation to our kids.
I guess. Yeah.
And also, let me lighten the mood.
It's a good reminder to
Patrick. If she had said no, I'm not interested in, you know, home education, would you have said, right, I'm out of here? Be honest.
It was an important point to me.
Yeah,
it just was.
You're a pretty black and white sort of a guy.
Well, tell them about our date, the interview process, because so I had come from a convent school in Birmingham where, without realizing it, you just absorb the feminist culture. So you're automatically put on the track of education, profession. That's what you do. Maybe you'll get married. we did have vocations weeks, you know, religious life was mooted as an idea, but it was just, you were on this treadmill and this direction. So then I left and I worked in a Catholic retreat centre. Then I worked with the Jesuits for a year. And then I went to Craig Lodge. And I've often said that Craig Lodge was like, it cut off the feminist parts
I
of
made a
me.
real job of her.
It really did. Because
What is Craig Lodge?
Craig Lodge is a house of prayer in Scotland. And so 30 years ago, I was a missionary. That we weren't called missionaries. We were just members of community. And we committed ourselves to pray, serve and evangelize, consecrated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and to love the Holy Cross. That was our mission
And
statement.
how did that eradicate the radical feminist side of
So
you?
this prayer house in the middle of the Highlands,
which is absolutely
and it's
fabulous.
and it hasn't changed much in 30
That's
years. Like
just
my
a
daughter did her
beautiful
mission year
place.
last year, which was a great joy. So we would pray 5 times a day: morning prayer, adoration, midday prayer, evening prayer, night prayer, rosary. And then if there was a priest present, we'd have mass. If there was no priest, we had permission to do Eucharistic services. But what I saw there was married couples not aspiring professional success. And this was like, for the first while, it was like, well, what is this kind of commune kind of thing, you know? But I was very drawn. I was drawn enough to want to go there. I wanted to go because of the prayer. I wanted to go because we did school retreats and missions and stuff. Very little at that stage, but it was more prayer at the house, and people would come to the house for retreats. And I loved that. And I had done a year in a retreat centre already, but I really loved what I would call intense Catholicism. It was a real lived out experience of Catholicism. And a number of nuns would have come during our year and say, oh, you pray more than we do. And they'd laugh. We just used to go, that's really sad. That's so sad that this little group of lay people, and it happened regularly. And we saw then that the religious orders were praying less and less and being less fruitful. And we found that the more faithful we were to the prayer, the more fruitful the work would be.
How many years ago was this?
30.
And how did that remove the feminist thing?
So I think, had we met before, we probably wouldn't have married. I think I would have been in a different place. So I saw these young married couples. I saw people getting married younger to start with. So people who'd been in community, much like your netters, you know, they're meeting people, they're going through that cross together, they're discerning their vocation. They've seen what it's like living in the same area. So a number of our couples got married. Then they would gravitate back to Craig Lodge because you want that community, you want that support without the trappings of the world. So there was a much simpler lifestyle there, which I think was a big thing for me to learn. Just living very frugally, very simply. I wouldn't even say frugal. We lived lavishly, but we desired less. So we were happy with less, you know?
Well said.
You know, it was different. So I saw that. I saw young couples. I saw young men who had discerned the priesthood, discerned out, and then find their girl, find their spouse. And it was very joyful, and it was a very beautiful path to see. So when I came to Ireland from there, came for a holiday, stayed, still here. I think I was a very different person to even what I had been a year before, when I had lived and worked with the Jesuits for a year, and I was surrounded by radical feminists. It was just brutal. So I think Craig Lodge was like a repairing year.
So when you say radical feminism, define what that means in your head or what you experience.
Well, my experience of it. So I've met because of the stuff at the UN as well, I've met various leagues of feminism, but the Catholic radical feminists that I met, they wanted to change church teaching. They wanted priests to be married. They wanted women priests. They wanted this. It was the feminist agenda just being pushed into the church. And I was like 18, 19, 20 going, what the heck? And as I look back now, I can see that most of them had come from very hurt places. So one lady had experienced abuse. So this was all coming from her hurt. So a few others had experienced bad relationships. So this was all coming from their hurt.
How very good of you to recognize that they were good people, just hurt.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we had a meeting today about the Synod and Net's, you know, the local Irish Synod, and Net's contribution as a youth ministry to that. And we just had to work and back and forth different parts of the submission. But we got to a place in the end where we could recognize that people who wanted to change church teaching, they're not bad people.
That's right.
And once we recognize that, we can actually possibly change hearts. But until we recognize that, and it's a bit like your friend that you mentioned at the start who gave the talk, who's still alive. Yeah. What do you call her?
Barbara McGuigan.
No, Barbara McGuigan. Yeah. You know, that she just loved people, and she loved people who were pro-abortion to the point where...
And you're not saying that everyone involved in the Jesuits are radical feminists?
Disclaimer. Yeah. No, I don't think they are anyway.
Yeah.